So today I want to introduce you to someone who is extremely dear to my heart, and that is the Fool. Some people know of the Fool in tarot, which, the Fool is the top of the deck, is the 0, which I'll go into in a bit more in a second. The reason why I'm introducing you to the Fool today on the 30th of March instead of tomorrow, which is April Fool's Day, is because there's a bunch of cool fooling things happening tomorrow. And I wanted to just introduce you to how amazing the Fool is today, so that you might fancy getting more involved tomorrow with a bit more understanding of what's happening. Today I'm going to introduce you to the Fool. My introduction to the Fool began when I nearly drowned when I was 11 years old. So I grew up working at a Tudor recreation called Kentwell Hall, which is in Suffolk in the UK. And when I jumped in, I'd been jumping in all day, and we were in our shifts, in our smocks, those like white dresses that you wore as sort of underwear underneath your dresses. And that's what we were swimming in with our hats on, our coifs. And all day I'd been jumping in. And then suddenly I had a feeling that I shouldn't jump in. And because I suddenly hesitated and felt like I didn't want to do it, then a group of visitors ended up like congregating on the opposite bank, and everyone was shouting jump, jump, and the Tudors were shouting jump, and everyone just sort of was trying to get me to do it. And so I did. And as I jumped in, my shift went over my head and started pulling me under, and I kind of at first was just trying to flap it around and sort it out, and then I was like, I'll just try and get it off, and tried to put it off, but it was drawstring and it was all tied up, so I couldn't pull it off me. And then I was like, I'll just put your feet down. So I put my feet out, and it didn't hit the bottom, so I realised that I wasn't upright. And then I started to panic, because it was like, I don't know where the surface is and I'm running out of breath. And then I thought, well, just relax and let yourself go. And I opened my eyes and I could just see this white sheet with all the bubbles in green water. And I floated to the surface, and where I'd kind of managed to pull my shift up to like my nose, I saw through the gap a man in Tudor costume jump in, like a really old man in his full costume with like heavy woolen cloak and all this sort of thing. And so I thought, first of all, I'm safe. And I felt the water move when he jumped in. But it was like, first of all, I'm safe. And second of all, I hope he's okay. And then I blanked out. And then the next things I came to on the bank, and I'd had mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and I was naked, and I came to, and there was a whole like bunch of boys standing around me, and that was like embarrassing. Obviously 11 years old, would be at any age, I think. And then I was in shock for a few days. But I asked if the old man was okay. I was like, was he okay? And they were like, So a visitor had jumped in jeans and t-shirt behind me, and no one had jumped in front of me. There was no one in Tudor costume had jumped in. And then when I was 13, someone had told this story to someone who was pagan, a guy who worked there who was a beekeeper. And he came up to me and he said, so I heard that you made contact with the spirit world. And I was just like, and then he basically said that, he was a pagan, and he was interested in shamanism, and that the shaman was someone who, when they nearly died, would survive death, and people wanted to know how they did it. And since we've had existential thought and have feared death and have been aware that we're going to die, like the medicine men were the people that had survived death, and so people wanted to know how they did it, and they couldn't express it in words, so they would perform it, or they would do it in a kind of creative way, and those then became sacred acts that people thought were healing. So the way they danced and moved and sang was seen as healing devices, and they would then be kind of revered like priests and doctors within their communities. And he said, you've made contact with the spirit world, you've had a near-death experience, you're on the shamanic path. And I was like 13 and into Nirvana and had hennaed hair, and was like, that's really cool, thank you very much. And it just put it in my radar, it made me interested in it at the age of 13. And from then on, I kind of kept an eye out for it. And then I also was a theatre person, and I've always made theatre and was really into drama. And when I was 22, I moved to Brighton, and I met an awesome lady called Poppy Kay, who I adore, and we were doing a theatre company together. And then I, through her, became aware of her father, who's called Jonathan Kay. And Jonathan Kay is a theatre practitioner who has created a whole technique around the archetype of the Fool. And it's extraordinary, and I can't sum it up in one video. I'm going to have to look at bits of it with you in different videos. But he created this technique where you use the Fool as an archetype to perform with. And what I realised is the Fool is like the shaman and the medicine man. It's someone who, so the idea is that the Fool exists outside of the known. And the more we know, the bigger the circumference of the unknown becomes around it. And so the Fool is the 0 in the tarot. It's the top of the deck and is the 0. And the infinity is inner and outer. So the outer world goes on infinitely and the inner world goes on infinitely. And they're not separate infinities. And my infinity is not separate to your infinity. It's all the same infinity, but there's a twist. So that's everything, but there's a twist. And when that twist is untwisted and the inner and the outer are in one place, then that's everything. That's the circle. So you have a circle and it gets twisted. And what is that twist? That twist is you. And at some point, when we were born as children, and we were completely connected to our inner world, and our inner and outer were one thing. And then something happens in your childhood that makes you split, and it's a judgment that you make that is like, I'm separate, and you'll make a judgment. My one is I'm not good enough. So there's not many. There's only probably about 12 or so judgments that are the kind of crucial judgments that get made. But it's something like, I'm not good enough, and you go from being whole and complete to suddenly being twisted. And that twist is your judgment that everything passes through, and it's to protect you, and you need it. But it means you have an outer world and an inner world, and your outer world is the person we all know that you share with the world, and your inner world is the other part of you that's silent, that doesn't speak. And the only way for us to know about your inner world, you, is for you to creatively express it. And that's why the arts is so important, because literally otherwise this other dude is completely silent. So one of the things that's really positive about like what's happening right now with us being in quarantine is that we are suddenly in a situation where we're able to be with our silent twin a bit more and have some twin time. So this book was the one that pretty much got me into Fooling. The thing that was interesting in this, there was a moment in it where it says there's a difference between telling a joke and being a joke. And that was the difference between stand-up and clowning and fooling. Yeah, stand-up comedy is about telling a joke. And it's quite forthright. I see it as quite masculine. Whereas the fool and the clown are from a much more emotional place. And it's more about being a joke, like the joke's on you. And I think it's much more loving and kind. And it's showing how we're all, stand-up's a bit like, look at them. Whereas fooling and clowning is a bit like, I do this, do you do this too? I see this in you, I love you even though you have this and I have this, and I understand and I empathise with that shared thing that we have. So that was the moment where I went, okay, I'm not a stand-up comedian, I'm a fool. I'd love to get a tattoo of this dude. It's one of the earliest paintings of a shaman they found on the wall in a cave painting. But I love this image here. The skull and then the coconut and the idea of balance. And yeah, that the universe is full of chaos, and the fool just disregards binary oppositions. The fool can change sex. You think of like Laurel and Hardy, like the fool can change sex. They can walk in one door and then come in through another door. They can walk on the ceiling. You think of Wile E. Coyote running off the cliff and then not falling down until he notices gravity and then notices it. All of this magical stuff that we do in performance is all derived from the shaman who could fight physics and break physics because they'd fought death. And once they'd fought death, they realised that reality was a construct, that we were actually in a piece of theatre. It was a simulation, it was all a game, and therefore the rules did not have to be obeyed. It was all just to do with our perception. And if I say that I'm now sat on the ceiling and I'm looking up there and I can actually see my husband sat on the sofa playing computer games right now, and I'm having a lovely time here sat on the ceiling, it's great. And yeah, you're here in my bedroom with me. It's really nice to see you. Thank you for being here. I just clicked my fingers and you just appeared on my bed. Thank you. I can do whatever I want because none of it is real, and we can play around with these ideas. This is a really good book for tarot reading, and it's for the Thoth tarot deck, which is the tarot deck that I use. It's brilliant, and there's a really good reading every day of a card, one Thoth card pulled every day by Mystical Arts. I'll put that in the recommendations, but it's a really beautiful tarot deck to follow. And I'll read to you what this says about the Fool. So the keywords are openness, trust, ready to take a risk, courage to stand your ground, freedom, independence, creativity, great potential, possibility to take a quantum leap, listening to the heart's voice. The Fool is represented by the god of spring, Dionysus. The green colour reminds us of the powerful creative force of spring. The crocodile, the ancient Egyptian god of creativity, is also the bearer of the greatest creative powers. The long umbilical cord, connection to cosmic oneness, wraps the Fool in 4 spirals. The possibility of rebirth is given on all 4 planes of human existence: spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical. The prerequisite is your readiness to change in all areas, your responsibility for self-development. So the Fool is the end of the journey. So the whole tarot deck is a journey, and we'll look at that. It's a hero's quest, and you go through lots of different like twists of the wheel where you kind of, things are good and then things are hard and things are good, and it's the way that life is. Nothing stays the same forever. So we'll have good times, we'll have bad times, and the one thing you can trust is that nothing lasts forever. And the Fool is the beginning and end of the journey. So once you've kind of reached a level of enlightenment, a level of understanding and wisdom, you then start again, and there's another spiral, and it just goes on forever, which is wonderful because we never reach the end. Through humour, the shamanic Fool trips the light fantastic between binary oppositions, turning all roles and structures on their heads. From a postmodern point of view, culture is in an exciting state of flux, where all the rules are being called into question. By embracing the Fool, or the clown within us, we are embracing our capacity to accept change and celebrate creation. The world of the Fool is infinite because the world of every audience member is infinite. Who does not contain within them worlds unimagined, as Neil Gaimen once said. And then at the end I've put the quote, all the world's the stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 stages, from As You Like It. And when you learn the technique to fooling, there's 7 stages to the Fool. And yeah, the number 7 is very relevant to me. It pops up all over the place.